Islam Makhachev chokes Charles Oliveira to become a lightweight champion. After months of anticipation, Abu Dhabi finally played host to arguably the most stacked and star-studded card of 2022 to date. It featured 2 title fights topping the slate, multiple contenders in action looking to stake their claims for shots at their divisional gold, and a number of exciting prospects hoping to make an impression. The UFC 280 main event was the setting where Islam Makhachev submits Charles Oliveira in the second round to become the promotion's lightweight champion. It didn't take very long into the match for Makhachev to realize top position in the first round. Islam did a great job of being defensively responsible to avoid the submission attempts of Oliveira and stay in control. It was in the second act that Makhachev uncorked a massive right hand that dropped Oliveira. Unlike many other of Oliveira's opponents, Islam elected to follow Charles to the ground and quickly slapped on an arm triangle to get the tap. In his post-fight interview, Makhachev called the UFC's featherweight champion, Alexander Volkanovski, into the octagon to state that he wanted to face him for the pound-for-pound title down in Australia. Did you enjoy UFC 280? Let us know in the comments below. White raises one name when asked about Sterling's next bout. Following Aljamain Sterling's successful defense of his title at UFC 280, Dana White has suggested a former 2-division champion as the next challenger for the bantamweight belt. Yesterday's victory was Sterling's second defense of the bantamweight title after defeating Petr Yan earlier this year. White was asked at the UFC 280 post-fight press conference what the plan was for Sterling's next bout, and the UFC president provided an interesting response.
What do you want to see, huh? How about Henry Cejudo? That work?
It's likely that Funk Master will look to take at least a little bit of time off between title defenses, but in the meantime, White understands there will be consequences for him mentioning Cejudo's name.
Next, again, everybody's going to write that I said that that's the next fight, that's what's going to be written, but I'm just saying.
Petr Yan reacts to controversial UFC 280 loss with 3 strong words. The bantamweight contest ended up being named the event's fight of the night, although that extra money was probably of little consolation to Petr Yan. No Mercy showed very little reaction in the cage when O'Malley was declared the winner, but after the event the former champion decided to share his thoughts on Twitter. "Fuck the judges," said the Russian fighter. The nature of this loss to O'Malley no doubt stung even worse for Yan after the split decision against Sterling in his previous fight. Prior to that initial loss to Sterling, Yan was undefeated dating back to 2015, and had defeated 7 opponents since his 2018 arrivals in the UFC. Although the former champion probably still has a spot on the pound-for-pound list for many fans, he's now 1-3 in his last 4 fights. What do you think of Yan's reaction to the judging for his fight with O'Malley at UFC 280? Sean O'Malley's controversial win at UFC 280 ignites boxing corruption fears. The UFC 280 fight between O'Malley and Yan was far more competitive than many critics thought it would be, with both men having moments and rocking one another throughout. However, with over a round's worth of control time and heavy pressure for Yan, many people were shocked to see Sugar Sean get the split decision nod over the former champion. Following this controversial decision, the reaction among MMA fans was certainly contentious, as many people felt that Petr Yan got robbed and Sean O'Malley did not deserve the decision. However, former bantamweight and flyweight champion Henry Cejudo took things a step further. Taking to Twitter after the fight, Cejudo said what was on the minds of many, which was that O'Malley beating Yan was a massive robbery. However, he went further by appearing to suggest that there was some kind of fishiness to the judging, akin to that which is often seen in boxing, in order to promote the rising star. "Worst robbery in UFC history. I hope our sport doesn't become boxing," Cejudo wrote, tagging the UFC president. It will be interesting to see if the UFC makes the decision to have a rematch between these two, which could potentially silence the critics, or reward Sugar Sean with the title shot that he asked for, against the defending champion in Aljamain Sterling. How did you score the fight between Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan? Khamzat reported scrap with Team Khabib at UFC 280. Khamzat has apparently found himself in yet another outside the cage altercation, this time with members of Team Khabib at UFC 280. According to reports, Khamzat got into an altercation with Abubakar Nurmagomedov, Khabib's cousin who fought and won earlier on the card. Video was posted by none other than UFC middleweight Paulo Costa, showing Khamzat initially greeting Nurmagomedov, before shoving him, leading to the ensuing chaos.
I always ask God, but He gave me always more than what I ask. Alhamdulillah. And Abu Dhabi, thank you. I prayed so hard for this moment. All my life, when I was kid, I prepared.
An additional, closer angle shows the scale of how many people were involved in separating the two fighters.
For this moment, all my life, when I was kid, I'm preparing for that moment. Let's take a look at some work here. Charles Oliveira, as you expect.
It is not exactly clear at the time of writing what the cause was for Khamzat to get into an altercation with Nurmagomedov, or how much of the rest of his team was involved in this situation. What do you think was the cause of Khamzat's most recent altercation? Sean O'Malley believes it's only inevitable he'll fulfill the people's wishes by becoming the UFC bantamweight champion. O'Malley seems unfazed by the controversy surrounding his win and remains supremely confident in his prospects. At the UFC 280 post-fight press conference, the 27-year-old said that it's only inevitable that he'll become bantamweight champ, an outcome that he believes the people are truly yearning for.
Meantime?
Yeah, it's so hard to, like Dana says, it's hard to make fights that night, right after, or the day of. I'm sore, I have a headache, I'm tired, I don't want to fight anyone. I want to go home, see my princess. You know, it's inevitable. I turned 28. What's today? The 23rd already? I turned 28 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm going to be in this sport for a long time. You know, the people want me to be champ, so it's going to happen.
O'Malley is now unbeaten in 5 outings since losing via TKO to Marlon Vera in 2020. In his previous bout against Pedro Munhoz, an accidental eye poke from Suga saw it end in a no contest. But prior to that, Sean had finished his 3 previous opponents. What's your take on Sean O'Malley believing that the people want him as champ? Dana White gives massive update on McGregor's return status. The UFC president failed to provide any specific details about McGregor's plans, but White did at least confirm that the Irishman would need to return to the USADA testing pool for at least 6 months before fighting again.
Speaking of USADA, it appears on the database that Conor McGregor hasn't been tested this year. Would he have to complete 6 months before he can compete? Or how does that work?
Yeah.
So he can't return until 6 months.
Right.
McGregor's status in the USADA testing pool has been a popular topic in the MMA community as of late. In addition to the 34-year-old posting pictures of himself looking noticeably larger and more muscular than he did previously, McGregor's habit of jetting around the world on his private yacht has raised questions about if and how he's been submitting tests to USADA. It was recently confirmed that not only has the Notorious not been tested at all by the UFC's anti-doping partner this year, but he's also the only fighter on the promotion's roster that hasn't been tested during that period. What's your reaction to White's confirmation that McGregor will need to do USADA testing for at least 6 months before fighting again? We want to see your opinion in the comments. Volkanovski accepts Makhachev's challenge to fight for lightweight title. It looks like Islam Makhachev's first UFC lightweight title defense will be against the pound-for-pound king Alexander Volkanovski. Immediately after Makhachev's win, coach Khabib Nurmagomedov told UFC commentator Daniel Cormier that he's planning for his pupil's first title defense to come against featherweight champ Volkanovski at UFC 284 in Perth, Australia.
Charles Oliveira is number 2 pound for pound, right? He finished Charles. Now is our plan. Fly all the way to Australia and fight in pound for pound king backyard with Volkanovski. Let's do it. We know we're gonna finish this guy. Let's go.
Volkanovski of course quickly stepped into the octagon and accepted the challenge.
Alexander, this guy said he wants to fight you in Australia. Defend his championship against you where you try to become a double champion. Are you down?
Let's do it. Hey, the lightweight on the line, pound for pound number 1 on the line. Let's do it.
The matchup was of course what Volkanovski had been seeking after making his way to Abu Dhabi to be the backup for the UFC 280 main event. If the bout with Makhachev becomes official as per Khabib's plan, Volkanovski will face the lightweight champ in his native Australia when the UFC visits Perth for UFC 284 in February next year. What's your take on Alexander Volkanovski accepting Islam Makhachev's challenge? That's all for today's video. If you want to know the latest UFC news, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications bell, and click the like button, so you don't miss any details about the upcoming fights. Thanks for watching. See you soon.